From Major Hurricane Milton, which is on its way to Florida in the next few days, to an inland cold front that's going to bring in some cooler temperatures, I've got all the details on USA Weather.
One Nation Weather.
Thank you for taking time out of your day to tune into my video. I want to start with a brief overview of Milton and the cold front that are driving the headlines for today's weather video. Then I'll talk into the specifics of those topics later in the video, so make sure you're using the timestamps in the description if you want to skip ahead to any part. But I want to go ahead and zoom in on the general weather pattern as we go into our Monday, October 7th of 2024. And overall, things are going to be pretty quiet as we're going to have the jet stream dipping down like this behind that cold front you can see lingering into some parts of the New England states, particularly New Hampshire and Maine. The flow diving down from the Dakotas to the Carolinas is not only going to be what brings in cooler air into especially the eastern third of the country through most of this week, it is also going to be the flow that helps steer Hurricane Milton towards Florida. And yes, Hurricane Milton is a name that was not really expected just a couple of days ago when I made my last video. All of a sudden, we saw an area of spin develop, and just like that, in the warm Gulf waters, we are going to have a hurricane approaching, possibly at major hurricane status, approaching Florida Tuesday, October 8th. You can see it there just off that northwestern tip of Cuba, looking like it's in line to head towards Miami, but then making that curve towards the northeast. I'll explain a little bit more of that steering again, as I mentioned a little bit later in the video, but around Wednesday evening, it's when this landfall is expected, at least according to the European model, regardless of where on the likely peninsula that this storm makes landfall. The entirety of the Florida Peninsula from the west to the east coast is expected to see some significant impacts from rain, wind, surge. I'll have all the rest of the details here on Milton just momentarily, but I did want to remind everyone that the weather model maps that I use throughout my videos are often from WeatherBell. There's a free trial link to them below in the description of this video if you want to check them out and get some of those maps for yourself. Also, if you're new to the channel and you enjoy the rest of this video, I would love for you to consider hitting that subscribe button as I'm on my way to 6,000 subscribers. But here we go, taking a look at the 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Central Time, Sunday evening National Hurricane Center cone regarding Hurricane Milton. It's already a hurricane just after becoming a tropical storm on our Saturday, and it is at Category 1 status as I'm filming this video. Probably very soon to become a Category 2 storm. For now, though, 85-mile-per-hour winds and gusts of around 105 miles per hour already getting going in the southwest Gulf. This storm is making some rare movements. This is a rare event for it to be making its way from west to east. In fact, moving a little bit from northwest to southeast before making that curve back towards Florida in the coming days. What a crazy motion, but what I can tell you is it's staying south of some of that upper-level wind energy that I'll talk about later in the video that could help to tear apart this storm. It's going to stay south of it in the near term, and it is looking like it could become a Category 3 hurricane, and that's what this Hurricane Center official guidance is indicating. By Monday afternoon, already looking at a Cat 3 major hurricane passing on that northwest side of the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, where tropical storm to even low-end hurricane conditions could still be possible. As it makes its way just to the north of Merida and then north of Cancun, we could see the storm approach the high-end Category 4 to even low-end Category 5 threshold. Gusts upwards of 160, 170, maybe even 180 miles per hour as it moves through some of the most favorable waters possible in the Gulf that are fairly untapped, at least since the early parts of the season when we had some storms make a run at Texas. This is anticipated as we go towards the early parts of our Wednesday by the Hurricane Center to remain a Category 4 hurricane, but then weaken down due to some environmental factors that I've already kind of hinted at and we'll talk about in a minute. A Category 3 hurricane by landfall, which is going to be sometime Wednesday afternoon into the evening, and at the latest probably early into our Thursday morning. Gusts could still be upwards of 120, 130 plus miles per hour as this comes on shore, and right now the cone of uncertainty has landfall anywhere from just north of Tampa to as far south as around Cape Coral and Naples. The impacts, regardless of where the landfall occurs, are going to spread across the entirety of the Florida Peninsula and maybe even into some parts of the Panhandle. You need to be ready for that there. The storm will eventually weaken as it makes its way back out into the Atlantic Ocean while getting torn up by a front. Let's go ahead and see what the models are depicting in terms of their model intensity guidance here from tropicaltidbits.com. I've put little dates down there on the bottom so that you can see what those forecast hours coincide with. And as we go through our Monday into our Tuesday, this is when the strengthening of this compact hurricane is likely in the southern and south central parts of the Gulf of Mexico. Cat 3, Cat 4, maybe even Cat 5 strength is quite likely as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours after I film this video. By the time we get towards that landfall late Wednesday, though, notice the models begin cascading downward even before this makes interaction with land. I think it's going to be down down to around a Cat 3, maybe even a Cat 2 upon landfall if the current atmospheric ingredients continue to look the same. Again, just a little bit of a different perspective on some of the track lines here. This pretty much coincides with that National Hurricane Center cone, though. The model's really lining up that we're going to see these spaghetti plots make their way through the southwest Gulf, then take a turn towards the northeast. We see the pressure actually go up a little bit, indicating a weaker storm as this approaches the Tampa Bay area. Nonetheless, a strong landfall of it, possibly what could still be a major hurricane, is anticipated on the west coast of Florida as we head towards the middle of this week. And I think the NAM model just does a great job of showing exactly how this could play out. Please remember, this is just a representation of what could happen. Don't trust your life with this model, and don't expect that its exact locations of the eye. The impacts are going to play out, in real life. But here we go into our Monday afternoon. You can see that on the northwestern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, we're probably going to have that compact major hurricane Milton. It's already looking like it's beginning that rapid intensification as I film this video on your Sunday evening. So by Monday afternoon and evening, don't be surprised if we have a Cat 4, maybe even going on Cat 5 hurricane here in the south central Gulf. I'm telling you, there's going to be a lot of hype going around as to how strong this storm is going to be, and a lot of people are going to make you think that this storm is going to stay at this Cat 4, Cat 5 threshold that we continue to see into our Tuesday morning there in the south central Gulf, even by the time this makes its way towards Florida. But I want to say not so fast, because you see some of this moisture already out ahead of Milton, and you'd think, okay, this moisture is here and it's going to actually support Milton, feed right into it. This moisture is associated with a front that's crashing in from the north. This front is going to even get some additional reinforcements from the north heading out of Tuesday into Wednesday, and that's going to feed some dry air into the storm. Notice how the storm kind of rides up into the front as it gets pulled in by the southerly flow. The NAM model still doing a good job with timing. This is Wednesday in the early morning, beginning to speed up and accelerate into that front as it approaches the Florida Peninsula. Look at that. You can see that eye making its way right on track towards that Tampa Bay area. And notice the storm looks a little bit more disheveled. It's not gone, and we're still going to have plenty of hurricane force winds circulating around this, and maybe even already kicking up with surge on the west coast as early. Again, this is around Wednesday morning heading towards the noontime hour. But I really do think that this storm is not going to be, say, a Cat 4 or Cat 5 hurricane upon landfall because of the energy from the front coming in from the north and because of the way that's going to kind of shear apart the system. I'll show you the shear in a second. Notice how the NAM model really picks up on that by indicating that the eye could become a very wide and kind of broken into our Wednesday evening. This storm probably Wednesday evening, if it isn't already making landfall, it will be very darn close to it. And into our Thursday morning, we'll see that occur again somewhere very close to the Tampa vicinity. While everything I've been saying so far is without hype, and I say some good news in the fact that that front could help tear the storm apart, the same thing that tears a storm apart is also going to broaden the impact spectrum of the system. So the more it is impacted by those stronger upper level winds from the north, the wider the impacts are going to be. So we could be seeing very heavy impacts from the eastern parts of the Panhandle all the way down to the bottom of the peninsula as we go into late Wednesday, if this storm really gets torn up and gets shredded into at least a broader tropical storm to hurricane impact type of setup. Here we go. Let's take a look at the wind shear. This is basically the strength of winds as you go with height into the atmosphere, and the GFS model does a great job of showing how Milton, you see the little red dot down there towards the northern tip of the Yucatan, it is going to stay south of a lot of the energy flowing in the atmosphere here that's going to be in the northern Gulf and towards northern Florida, at least for the next 24 to 36, 48 plus hours. Once we get out of Tuesday and towards Wednesday, though, that's when things begin to change. We start to see a second front support that first front there, and look at the deep reds up there in northern Florida. This is the point where a little hurricane, as much as it tries to stay away from this wind in the atmosphere, that's going to really help to tear it apart and kind of disorganize some of the spinning that's going on it by just kind of pulling it all in one direction. It's going to be very hard for this storm to resist getting pulled into that jet stream. And look at that, just like clockwork, we kind of see this storm get pulled up towards the Tampa Bay area while also becoming a little bit broader and kind of fitting into that jet stream like a little puzzle piece there. By Thursday morning, we're probably going to have some of those impacts pushing onshore into the central parts of Florida. This could include places like Orlando, and then eventually we'll see the impacts by the end of Thursday, since this is moving so quickly into the jet stream, make their way off the east coast of Florida, and then we're going to be done with the impacts other than the big waves and rip currents at the beach. I'll have more updates on Milton in future update videos, some YouTube shorts, whatever that I'll be posting. Maybe even I'll go live at some point. We'll see. Make sure you're subscribing for that. But I want to go ahead and jump into the temperature setup on land because I promised to talk about that cold front here. You can already see a little bit of that, around 5 to 10 degrees below average temperature-wise as we go into our Monday in the Ohio Valley and some parts of the Northeast. Meanwhile, the story of this week in the western and central U.S. is going to be the ridging as temperatures surge to 10, 15, even 20 degrees above average for this time of the year. Going into our October October 9th, which is Wednesday. So skipping through our Tuesday, jumping into our Wednesday, you can see that a lot of the eastern third of the country, as I promised earlier, we're going to be a little bit cooler than average. Meanwhile, behind that front, we continue to see the rest of the thirds of the country. So the other 2/3, the central and western parts, we see them continuing to warm up 10, 15, 20 degrees above average October 9th. And even as much as 25 degrees above average through the Dakotas, Minnesota, Iowa, and into Wisconsin by the time we go to the end of this week. This is as we go through Thursday into our Friday, October 11th. Pretty much all of the nation's midsection well above average at this point, but the East Coast still holding on a little bit to that cooler air. That will include some cooler nights, especially in some parts of the mid-Atlantic, southeast, and then back on up towards the northeast. Let's go day by day with those daily high and low temperatures from the National Digital Forecast Database. Starting out with tomorrow morning, which is our Monday, October 7th. Look at the Midwest into the Great Lakes, already behind that cold front that's been bringing a little bit of some thunderstorm activity in this region this weekend. Now clearing out, drying out. Man, the humidity levels are going to be really low at this point, as temperatures are going to be in pretty much only the mid and upper 30s, as well as a few low 40s across this zone into our Monday. Meanwhile, south of that front, which you can see here with that line being drawn anywhere south of this line, we're looking at plenty of 50s and 60s to go around. That includes most of the mid-south and southeast for Monday morning. Back there in the southwestern U.S., California valleys, those circles indicating record warm lows for this time of the year. The temperatures never being that warm to start the day since records have been kept. That's going to continue most of this week with the ridging in the west continuing to build. Meanwhile, here in the east, there's that cold front. You can see where the jet stream is diving down, at least by our Monday afternoon. 70s dipping as far south as northern Arkansas and northern Tennessee. 60s and even some 50s further north into parts of Wisconsin and Michigan, even northern and eastern Ohio getting into the 50s. Those are high temperatures on Monday. And then as we go into our Tuesday morning, northeast Ohio, you're getting down very close to being around the 40-degree mark. Some 30s sprinkled in the mix, maybe some isolated frost throughout these Midwestern and Ohio Valley states. And by our Tuesday afternoon, we don't warm up too much, but it's going to be a nice fall day, at least if you consider these temperatures nice. 70s widespread. I definitely want some 70s here in the South Carolina region, and if they're not filling in for most South Carolinians by the time we go into our Tuesday, they will begin into our Wednesday. Wednesday morning, cooler across a lot of the southeast even. We're starting to see some 50s trickle into places like Mississippi and Alabama. The further north you go and the further northeast you go to that Canadian border, very close to frost and freeze conditions there through a lot of the Great Lakes and northeast. Wednesday afternoon, look at the warmth building back behind the cold front into the central plains. This is that ridging I was talking about with the temperature anomaly graphics. Looking at the mid and upper 80s surging as far north as parts of South Dakota and into Iowa and southwest Minnesota. 90s near some record highs there in parts of Texas. It's going to be a crazy warm-up for this time of the year in this region of the country. Meanwhile, east of that warm-up, still looking at plenty of 60s and 70s in the east, and into our Thursday morning, that cool air is actually going to continue to sink to the southeast over the southeastern region of the U.S. Arkansas, Mississippi, northern Alabama, northern Georgia, and parts of the western Carolinas all sinking down close to the low 50s into our Thursday morning with more 30s and 40s. I'm going to skip through Thursday afternoon just because it's fairly similar to Wednesday afternoon, but more warmth, especially into the central U.S. And here's some more of that warmth, even continuing into the overnight hours. Here's a crazy stat. Going to be in the upper 50s and low 60s here in the upper Midwest Friday morning. These numbers are actually warmer than the temperatures in Georgia. The southern parts of Georgia are going to be equal or cooler into our Friday morning. And it's going to be equal or cooler in those areas for daytime highs as well. 75, say, in Macon, Georgia, while up there in Des Moines, Iowa, we are at 86 Friday afternoon. What a crazy warm up there in the central U.S. in comparison to what's going on with that troughing continuing in the east. We are now to the end of this video because there's not much going on rain-wise across the rest of the country or snow-wise. Can't talk about that. So I'm done with this consistent and accurate update, or at least I hope you found it consistent and accurate. If you want more updates like this in the future, make sure you're hitting the subscribe button down below. I hope everybody stays safe in the impact line of Milton. I'm definitely not done providing updates on it, though. Prayers for everybody who is in that track. I'll be keeping you updated.